Hello, Rob. Welcome to Superseed.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for welcoming me. I appreciate that because this is our conversation. This is not like my podcast. This is a Seeding Sovereignty podcast and the podcast of everybody. I like to think. So thank you so much for welcoming me to this podcast. It's really exciting that we get to talk. I'm just going to read your bio quickly for listeners. Okay. Robert Jeffrey is a dad to over 80 houseplants. He's a Black entrepreneur and content creator who uses plant culture to share anti-racist work with broad audiences. Planter Rob was born in Birmingham, Alabama. After graduating from Western Michigan University with a degree in organization communication, Rob moved to New York, where he launched a business in the floral industry. The startup's message: let's chat plants and racism. Let's chat plants and racism.
Yes, let's chat plants and racism. Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Seriously, let's dive in. I wanna hear kind of maybe for you to give the audience a little more color, a little more context, and expand on that bio, because I feel like that. It's a bio and it can be limiting. It's short. Tell folks a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah. So being from Birmingham, Alabama, the birth of the civil rights movement, I've always had a passion for helping others and uplifting others and empowering communities. And I visited New York one time when I was in undergrad, and the energy here was amazing. And it was always a goal since then to move to New York City. I have always dwelled in the art and creative spaces. Through high school, I was in the band, and it was one of my first outlets as a Black, gay young man to be able to be exposed to different cultures and different people. And the band would always travel, and that was the moment I started to travel and be exposed to different cultures, and it made me want to take up more space as a Black Southern gay man. And I continue to drive and try to do that no matter what space I am in and no matter what circumstances I find myself in. And depending on that situation is kind of how I move throughout life and determine where my energy and my power should be invested. And
It's incredible. Yes. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because I'm very curious about that and the role of like taking up more space and the role of music in your upbringing. You mentioned also when we were talking before we started recording about your dad and your family a little bit. I think that if you feel comfortable talking a little bit more about kind of I guess, your path, getting a little bit more personal, expanding a little bit more on the path that has led you to the work that you're doing today, from maybe like the values that you grew up with, the examples you had, the mentors that you had. I know that's kind of a lot, but take that whatever direction you want.
Yeah. Also, I love that question. I don't mind diving into that. I love being able to share stories of Black gay men.
Yes.
That's what I am. So my parents are super religious. They're Christians, and my father is a pastor. He's a preacher. And growing up in a household with that as my mentor was very detrimental to my mental health. And I learned how to mask and how to hide and how to survive in that type of environment. And with that is what empowered me to, once I was free of that, to kind of empower others and encourage others to kind of do the same thing. My mother was a preacher's wife, and she was always so caring, so endearing, so passionate about not only uplifting her husband, the preacher, but also caring for her family. And with that, I learned how to be tender. I learned how to be nurturing, and I learned how to love others while supporting my own beliefs. And when I came into my own as an adult man, I still hold those principles that she and he both taught me to my core.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I find that, that tender and caring nature, you carry it so strongly, and you carry it with your plants. Can you tell folks a little bit about your fatherhood to 80 plants?
Yeah. So my grandmother was a gardener, and I remember I had family in Michigan, and she was in Michigan, and we would travel through the summers to visit her. And as a child, I used to love going to her garden. She had one of those shotgun type houses where there's a front porch and you can just walk right through. And in the front, she always had a garden, whether it would be tomatoes or peppers or, pumpkins growing up there. She would have something growing, and I always wanted to play in it, but she would not allow me
we have to eat that.
play in it. Yeah. And so I was determined to, once I got my own space, to grow my own garden. And that didn't happen until I was able to, get accepted to college at Western Michigan University and be the first generation in my family to be able to achieve that status was mind-blowing. I mean, I remember being dropped off at college, and my mother was in the hospital, so she couldn't come to drop me off. And my father was, he had just been diagnosed with glaucoma, and he was a truck driver full-time while he preached on the side.
Wow.
And so with that, he had just been laid off from his job. And so he literally dropped me off. And, I remember seeing like my roommates, their families, their mothers and brothers and sisters, they're all there, cousins, huge families, dropping them off together. And I remember just being, my father had to drop me off, and he had to go back to the hospital to attend to my mother. And I took that as that's first generation problems. That's just something that I'm going to have to deal with for, the next generation to not have to, in my experience, suffer without having the supporting backbone of your parents there on your first day. Yeah. And once I had my space, I needed something to remind me of home, and that was a plant, and that was a pothos plant. And if you're not familiar with the pothos, it's one of the most easiest, most propagatable, fast-growing plants that you can have, and people love to share those propagations. And I remember my grandmother had this long, my great-grandmother, we call her Medea, she had this long, huge pothos in her porch yard, and whenever I see pothos, I think about that, and it takes me back to that. And so in my college dorm was where I had my first plant, and I was determined to get even more plants in my room. But fortunately, I shared it with another roommate in a small dorm.
Right.
So
in there, yep.
Yeah, wasn't able to take up too much space. Right. But my first apartment roommate, he understood my passion. He has a passion, and he played tuba, and so he was extremely loud. And my room would be the room for spaces. I had like a long lounge couch and plants, and people would just come in my room and chill and hang out and like kind of relax and breathe. And I enjoy bringing that essence to different spaces wherever I take up. Yeah. And once I got to New York City, it was over. It was over. I brought in as many plants as I could, given the space and lighting that I had. Yeah. And I started sharing my passion on Instagram in 2019, right before the pandemic took off. Yeah. And you weren't seeing many people that looked like me in those spaces. We didn't see us in the advertisement. We didn't see us in the marketing. We didn't see us on any other platforms. Yeah. And so I was determined to uplift that community and be seen in a field that I'm passionate about, a field that I, am a consumer in, a field that I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I want to be seen, I want to be heard, and I need to be in the marketing. And so 80 quickly turned into 100, which quickly turned into 120. And then eventually people started asking me, hey, do you mind if you could sell me this plant or give me this plant? And so with that, it just became, maybe I should actually start a business because there aren't people with businesses in this field that look like me. And people obviously want to support the people that look like me in that field. And so I started my business, and it's been doing really well. It's been doing great. But my logo is Let's Chat Plants and Racism. And the racism part for the viewers is crossed out. And so I like to allure people in by saying, let's chat plants. And they see that part. Right. And they come closer to look at the racism. And they're like, but there's a caveat as well. And so I remember being at the Brooklyn Museum as a vendor, and I was selling plants, and it was a nice spring day, very nice, lots of foot traffic in the area. Yeah. And there was a couple that came up to me, a white couple, and they saw my sign, my logo, my huge logo that looks like me, and they saw the huge Let's Chat Plants, and they were so excited. They said, oh my gosh, yes, Let's Chat Plants. Yeah. And then they also saw racism crossed out, and he was like, yeah, I'm so sick of talking racism. And I was like, this is my moment. This is where my business chimes in. Yes. And so I immediately engaged him and said, well, let's talk about that. Why are we sick about talking about racism? Yeah. Me as a Black man, I have to move through this life every single day, every single second
Yeah.
experiencing racism. And if you can't even talk about it, how am I going to not experience it, you know?
Yes.
And so they were able to make a purchase.
Oh,
they did support the
they
business,
better.
which is great. And they also follow me, and they're still followers and still actually in contact. And
Wow.
to this day, I get messages from people that I have sold plants to that will message me and say, hey, you've changed the way I think about Thanksgiving with my family. You've made me, you know, I walked away from the table when my Uncle Jerry said something, or I have turned my back. I cut off my mom because she didn't accept my Black boyfriend, or, you know, things of that nature. And it's empowering me to continue going, because people need to see that this work needs to be done.
Yeah.
This work can be done.
Yeah.
And they also need to feel like they're being validated in that work, even if they're not on the receiving end of racism.
Yes.
And I get that. I get that.
Yes, that's incredible. I'm like, thank you for sharing those anecdotes. I think that's really powerful for people to hear. And I want to reference something that you have like on your kind of website. I think this is where I found this, that, you know, when you tell people you sell plants, that they often respond with a violent microaggression, cracking jokes about marijuana. But with Black men behind bars at horrifically disproportionate rates due to a plant, it's no joke. Rob's on a mission to normalize conversations about plants and racism so we can grow sustainable justice while tearing up the roots of systemic oppression. I think that's beautiful is obviously a gross understatement. What has it been like to be on the receiving end of people making microaggressions like that against you as a Black man selling house plants?
You know, it's honestly, I want to say eye-opening. At the same time, it's not surprising. I've received obviously hateful emails that stated that, like, I shouldn't have a business in this industry, I shouldn't be in this industry, or I should go back to the fields and pick cotton. And with that, I have to understand that comes with the territory that I am in, especially with me being my motivation is to reach those people, right? Is to reach people that are racist. Yes. That's my goal. And so when I get those DMs, I respond.
Yes.
I want to engage in conversation, because I feel like communication is going to be the only way that we're all able to share stories and come to a certain agreement and an understanding of how we're moving about through life. And I embrace it. I tell people to embrace it. When you're on the receiving end of racism, when people are in your DMs or in your face, or you're even receiving microaggressions in real time, address it. Make it an issue. A lot of people don't realize they're racist. Because society has built a society that is racist, and they seem and deem themselves to be right. And if they don't know they're wrong, they're not going to address their issue. And so, to this day, people still ask me if I sell weed, if I have any, you know, indicas or sativas available, and it's heartening. It's harmful, and it's honestly not who I am as a person. And I don't think anything about my brand says I sell weed.
Right.
And when you just see the image of a Black man, which is my logo, and then you jump to that speaks a lot about where society is at and the harm that society has done on Black men.
Yes.
And I'm glad that my logo is able to address that right up front. We're able to immediately engage in a conversation. Yeah,
absolutely. It's incredible that you are, like, on this podcast and sort of in general. Oftentimes I think about folks who are doing the work of, like, changing systems of oppression from sort of like a sneaky place, like a more covert place, right? You're like bringing folks in, and then you're like, no, we're going to talk about racism, and we're going to dismantle this system through houseplants. You thought you were coming here to buy a houseplant, and that takes such a level of, as you said, embracing, like, to be able to know that you are going to be on the receiving end of microaggression and outright racism and harm. Like, that takes such a level of just courage and love, like such love. How do you kind of deal with that? Like, does that take a toll? Like to know that you could be receiving DMs that are extremely hurtful on a regular basis, like what's your approach? What is your way of almost like regulating your nervous system? I would imagine that the answer has something to do with like tending to plants because that's what, right? But yeah, I'm so curious.
Yeah. So for me, I like to think a lot about the space that I'm in and that what comes with that. And I have to honor all of the spaces. I have to honor that, I'm on stolen land and I can't just be here and not also try to navigate through that, right? And as a Black man, I can't be here and not experience racism. And if I turn a blind eye to it, you're going to turn a blind eye to it. And as no matter how we've been on the receiving end of racism for hundreds of years, and this is not new. But it's rarely that you see people that look like me in this space that's able to speak on it abruptly and inform others what's happening.
Yeah.
In the agricultural community, if you think about nurseries or greenhouses and things like that, if you go visit a greenhouse, you're going to see the laborers are people of color. The laborers are tending to the plants, that are doing the deliveries, that are driving the trucks, that are moving the plants. They're people of color 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas the CEOs are white people of European descent. And that's harmful. This is $1 billion industry, and they're paying the laborers pennies to the dollar minimum wage, and not giving them any type of benefits. And with that, I just want to continue to take a space and speak for those communities as well. And if I don't do it, who's going to do it? If I don't see people like me that are doing this work, who's going to do it? And if I stop, who's going to do it? You know what I mean? And no matter how harmful and hurtful it is to me, I have to think about, I reference slavery a lot because it's the most harmful that's been done to my people in U.S. history. And so I reference it because that's where I can speak from an ethos type of point of view.
Yeah.
What if they stop fighting for their freedom? What if that one African that talked back did not speak back? What if that one person was told no, they just went with that no?
Yeah.
We wouldn't be where we are today. And so if I receive a DM that's saying you should not do this, or if I receive a message that's harmful and I just stop doing what I'm doing, I'm not moving us forward. I'm just sitting in the space where they want us to continue to sit. And that's not where I want to be.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit. I want to explore actually your relationship to like your social, and talk about social media a little bit as a little bit of a like sort of, I don't want to, not a diversion from this topic, but I first want to like actually talk a little bit about plants themselves, and like speaking about how most of the time, or as you were saying, 100% of the time, folks of color are working in these spaces, being paid pennies on the dollar of white European descendant CEOs. How do you prioritize, like with houseplants, sort of like businesses and supporting local, like supporting environmental consciousness and local businesses with plants and plant sellers? How can listeners do the same? What's your approach to that?
Yeah, so as a business owner in this field, I try to only shop from Black and brown companies, and it's hard to do. And you really do have to go out of your way to support these stores and businesses that are people of color owned, because that's how the system is set up.
Can you shout out a few if you want for listeners?
Yeah, I would shout out Natty Garden. They have 2 nurseries in Brooklyn. They're a great nursery. I shop there often. Brooklyn Pentology is also one that's Black owned, and I frequent there. There honestly isn't many, but when I shop locally, I like to shop from small boutique shops, plant shops. There's a lot in Chinatown that I like to shop at. Dahing is one of those. There's also a few others in Chinatown that don't really have names or social media accounts, but they are always the best places to shop, especially if you're looking for a diverse collection or great plants for decent prices. Definitely go there. But also, I want to encourage users or listeners to go out of your way to support Black and brown businesses. It's hard for a reason. And a lot of these businesses go out of their way to be in the spaces so that you can support them. And that's one thing you can do is you have to go out of your way to make, they're not going to make it easy for us to support each other. But that's what I would encourage you to do.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. So kind of going a little bit in a new direction with social media, because I think that's how we see each other first. That's how I see, right? Like that's how I saw you first on your socials. I want to talk about kind of how you have used your platform to advocate for the issues that you advocate for. I also would love to talk a little bit about how you've used your platform to advocate for Palestine. I see you're wearing your keffiyeh. Awesome. Yes. And when you're advocating for a free Palestine, like, do you see intersections with your work with plants?
Yeah. So honestly, social media, a lot of users use social media to kind of escape and as an outlet to what's actually happening in reality. And I realized that, and I am one of those users as well, and I love doing that. I created the space because I wanted to be able to check out and go to a green page full of plants, a healthy plant, and see a smiling face so I can have some positivity throughout my day. But over the years, I realized that can become very toxic, and especially if you're continuing to ignore the actual realities of what's happening in the world, even in your industry. I would say no matter what industry, if you're not even in the plant industry, no matter the industry you're in, there's going to be some type of system that you can break down and should be actively trying to break down. But for me, I wanted to be in a garden space because I wasn't seeing that happening. And so I like to use plant tips on how to care for your plants and also how to care for other people and other individuals and keep not just plants alive, but people alive, and not just think about, what's in your plant soil, but also what's in the soil that you're on, what's in the land that you're on, what's in the soil that's been stolen over in Congo, what's in the soil that's, that's just being salted by Israel right now in Palestine. And there's just so much that plants can teach us if we dive deeper, if we look deeper into it. Even the fact of how you got this plant that's native to India in your apartment in Brooklyn is like, let's dive into that. How did we get this plant over here? You know what I mean? And a lot of time people in the plant industry can be very surfacey. We just want to see a pretty leaf. We don't want to hear about how the leaf got here. We don't want to hear how hard that leaf had before it made it to my apartment. Right. And I want to encourage others to dive deeper into that while still being in a garden space, while still being very friendly, very happy, very positive, but just not toxic anymore. Just really addressing issues that's happening in reality in real time while enjoying our passions, while enjoying things that we enjoy. And I love a pretty leaf as well. Right. I love, one of my favorite plants is the leopard calathea. I can't grow it at all because my space just isn't built for it. But I love seeing that leaf. It has a purple back on it. It's just, purple's my favorite color. It's just one of those things. Yeah. And so with that, I want to encourage others to dive deeper, and no matter the space you're in, dive deeper and try to break down some type of system. Yeah. As far as Palestine go, my eyes were not open until October 7th. I'll be honest with you. And once that happened, I realized I have to do more. I'm not doing enough, and I could be doing more in my industry with my platform, with plants. And so I know I have a lot of viewers or a lot of following that like to hear me speak. They like to hear what I have to say.
I love to hear you speak.
Yeah. And so I have to speak on issues that need to be uplifted and uplift voices that need to be uplifted, no matter how dark and how sinister and how evil that is. Yeah. It's not my fault that I'm just a vehicle for the message. And I hate it, referencing cars.
You're I'm so sorry. Conduit. You're a
bicycle. But when it came to Palestine, I knew I needed to speak up and use my platform. And I've realized there's so much aspect when it comes to climate justice. The amount of the carbon emissions just Israel alone from the bombing has put out is ridiculous. And no one seems to be talking about that. Yeah. And they have also salted the soil over there, so it's not, conditions to grow, flowers and olive trees in. And they've chopped down thousands of olive trees, and it's ridiculous. And if you're someone that cares about plants and horticulture and climate, this is your conversation to be having. This is one for you to chime in on.
And you're chiming in a big way.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm also just thinking about all of the the ways that all these global issues intersect so intimately, particularly with affordable housing also locally. I want to talk about that a little bit too. You have a line of plants called Welcome Home Plants, which you describe saying, quote, "Our mission is simple: to provide horticultural support and services to those who need it most. As we all know, nature has an incredible ability to heal and uplift spirits. Through the Welcome Home Plants collection, we aim to create thriving indoor environments that nurture both the mind and the soul," end quote. Can you describe this mission and the work that you're doing a little bit more on affordable housing here locally?
Yeah, so with Welcome Home Plants, I really wanted to create a program, a platform, a means for people in the horticulture community and the plant community to be able to give back specifically in ways that they enjoy plants. There's no, there's everyone understands that, you want a plant in your space to provide a certain calm, a peace, and elegant to enhance the space. And no matter the space you're in, if you're at work, if you're in an office space, you're going to have a room full of plants. Your cafeteria may have room. I remember I worked at Google. The cafeteria was the area with the most plants because they want people to stay inside. And they want to bring nature inside. And I get that. And that's the same for, individuals living in supportive housing or individuals that are homeless or unhoused. They require and enjoy and need the same level of calmness and enhancement in their spaces as well. And when it comes to supportive housing, we don't think about that. We just think about getting people sheltered, getting people in a home. And research has shown that's not enough. People just don't need, caves. They need communities. They need programs that are going to keep them together and build community, and, and be able to, assimilate them back into, normal society. And so with Welcome Home Plants, I wanted to do that. I wanted to invite my following and then listeners and other people in on this mission, which is to create communities in supportive housing units. I've been working with Breaking Ground, and they are a nonprofit that provides permanent housing and supportive housing to residents in New York City. They have housing in all of the boroughs, and their residents are those that need supportive housing. And if you fall under this, you're typically suffer from some type of mental illness, or you're a single person on your own, or you're an HIV patient that just fell off and just can't get back on your feet. They provide housing for those type of communities, and I want to uplift and support those communities. They deserve a nice space full of plants. They deserve a garden. And I know a lot of times we don't think about that, but when you move into your apartment, you buy a plant because that's like, I'm home now. This is my space now. And so people that are in supportive housing, they probably can't afford to buy, a plant. Spend the $10, $15 in New York City, $35, $45 on a simple 6-inch plant. But they still deserve, and people need that. We create that for ourselves because we need that. And so I want to be able to create that for them because they need that.
Yeah. And how did you actually come to doing that? What was the point at which you took that idea or that kind of synergy energy into reality and actually started existing in the physical world doing this for these folks?
I love to travel. I travel a lot, and I travel to many different countries across the world. And in America, I see tons of unhoused communities. We like to call them tent cities. And they can be found just about in any major city: Los Angeles, Seattle, New York, Atlanta, Detroit. Wherever you go, you're going to find thousands, and I'm talking in the 50s of thousands, 60s of thousands of people that are unhoused in each of these cities. And it's hard for me to be, and also when I travel, I have to go to plant shops as well. I love visiting local plants and nurseries and being able to see, the different kinds of plants they have there. And while I would be doing that, I would see these communities of unhoused communities, and it just struck a nerve with me. And I said, I have to do something. I have to do something in this space. I have to be able to use my passion to uplift these communities. I can't just sit here and allow it to happen. And in New York City alone, of course, we have one of the worst, I don't want to say mayors, but we have one of the worst housing situations right now where the rent is way too high for a lot of even middle class people and folks. And We have unhoused individuals just about everywhere, the subway, the streets, alleys, just about anywhere, and we criminalize them.
Yeah.
We criminalize the poor as if they deserve to be in prisons, and we encourage our government and our state to, put these people in prisons where society considers prisons to be used as a means of punishment. And so if we're putting people that are poor, unhoused, or mentally unstable in prisons, why are we punishing them for that? Why are we doing that? And a lot of times shelters are not the answer. Shelters are also dangerous. We can't just rely on temporary housing for people. I like to refer to plants. When you go, to a nursery and you buy a plant, it's going to come in a plastic pot. It's going to come in something that's not sturdy, something that's not sustainable, something that's not going to be used for a long time. You're going to have to transfer it into a more permanent housing, more permanent pot situation. Yeah. And so that's the same with people. You can't just put them in a temporary situation and think there's going to be enough for them. They need permanent housing. People need permanent housing, not just shelters. Shelters can be dangerous. They're temporary. The hours you can be there are ridiculous. If you're in New York City, the list to get into a shelter is extremely long. Right. There's been research and data and crime all throughout shelters in New York City. Yeah. And so I'm an advocate for permanent housing. We need to build more housing, not just for, those that are unhoused, but also for those that want housing, also for communities that want to stay in New York City. We don't want to be pushed out because of how unaffordable housing is. And so when I say we need more housing, I mean for everyone, not just those that are unhoused. Again, for everyone. And so with my platform, Welcome Home Plants, I want to encourage us to be able to enhance the spaces of those in support of housing while also advocating for housing for all.
So I'm listening to you speak so passionately and powerfully about these issues, and I am inclined to be Rob, you should run for elected office. However, luckily for us, you actually are a community board member. Yeah. So I really want to talk about that. I really want to talk about the fact that not only are you a plant dad who tackles racism head on and has difficult conversations and spreads the joy and healing powers of plants and increases housing resources and general well-being for people, but you are actually on your local community board. You are bringing these issues. You are part of the conversation. I will let you actually perhaps fill in the blanks, but as far as I understand, community board, for folks who aren't familiar or folks who are, maybe, I don't know if it's actually only a New York City thing called community board. I actually should know more. Please fill in the blanks. But it's kind of like the very entry level, I would say, of local politics, where the community board is a group of individuals who represent their community, their district, and they vote on issues like zoning issues, if there's even if it's a liquor license or those kind of decisions that really impact the community, and then city council then is able to take those considerations and those opinions very seriously. They don't have to actually, move forward with everything or agree with everything. But the community board is kind of like the representation of the district for the city council.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. You're spot on.
Well, I may or may not be running actually for my local community board, so I have to learn a little bit about this, and I'm so inspired by you. So, tell us a little bit more about that. I want to really unpack this.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the community board is an advisory board essentially for the city. They make decisions and votes on issues around transportation, public housing, zoning, parks and recreational areas, liquor licenses, cannabis licenses. And we are a small body that represents the district that we're in. I'm in Community Board 1, which is Brooklyn and Greenpoint. Brooklyn and Greenpoint.
I wish it was all of Brooklyn.
yeah. Williamsburg and Greenpoint. And we just Tuesday, I had a community board meeting, and we were actually discussing daylighting. If you're not familiar with daylighting, that is at an intersection where there's basically a lot of space that allows for planters or painting, or an area that provides pedestrians more safety to be able to cross the street, while also providing visibility to cars, so they're able to see the street visibly without having to hit or take the risk of hitting pedestrians or kids or pets that may just want to cross the street.
Right.
And so, issues like that is what we vote on. And for me, I wanted to take up space on this board because I realized in my community, we are an aging community. We are a community board that has been around and established, I believe, since the 80s. And that's historic. We are one of the oldest community boards, and we are very strong and have a huge voice in the political field here in New York City. And I wanted to be a voice and take up space as a Black gay man in that.
Because sorry to interrupt you, but I feel like most community board members are very much older white men. Is that generally correct?
They tend to be older white men or that are retired or that have, been in the city for years through, generations, and think that you should only be on the community board if you were born in this city or you're born here. And it's like
Meanwhile, they've never taken the bus.
Right, never taken the bus, or your parents were not born here, or like this is a city that embraces, immigration. We embrace people from all over. Right. And our community boards should also reflect that, and they should reflect the community.
The community.
Yeah. And a lot of times these boards do not do that. They are, a lot of times, no matter where you are, you can be in Crown Heights, you can be in Harlem, you can be in heavily people of color, dense populations, communities. The community board will be white. And that is not by default. That is not by any, issue of Black and brown bodies not, being available. That is because these people have the time.
Yeah, it's a volunteer position.
It's a volunteer position. You don't get paid for it, and they have the time to, to make decisions on the communities that you live in, and they don't actively participate in. I remember just this Tuesday, I remember hearing a fellow board member say that she doesn't bike, and we were on the issue of community boards setting term limits for board members. And so this is a board member that had been on a community board for years. And my community, we want more bike lanes. We want to be able to bike through Williamsburg, just like we were able to, bike through any other city that's rich in transit. And we want to set that precedent in our communities that Williamsburg is very bikeable and safe. And so we want all of our street corners to be daylighted if possible. We want to prioritize the lives and not the businesses per se. Not to say businesses are going to lose out because of daylighting, but it's going to be, if we should prioritize safety. It's point blank and simple. As a community board, we should just prioritize safety, and we should be telling the city we want to be behind this safety measure.
Right.
But my point was that if you're somebody on the community board and you feel like you can't be active in the conversations that the community is currently having, you should not take up space as an elected member. And I probably going to receive some slack for that, but I'm going to sit firmly in it. If you're not participating in the community, you should not be on the community board.
Yes, I agree with that fully. I just quickly want to ask, how did you get from kind of I have a stake in my community, and I see ways that, I can use my voice to uplift others around me and all that exciting stuff, and actually getting on the board. But you don't have to talk about the process of applying per se, but just for folks, I think people who are listening, and thinking about the political state of not only this country, but the world, and how we need more people who have a stake, who are impacted by all of the services that communities can offer, who can dream up a world and continue to fight for this world that we are building that is vibrant and symbiotic and regenerative for everybody, to actually get in those positions. So this is sort of a statement of me just encouraging people to not, it's not that, it may be more complicated in our minds than it might be in reality, or just because it's a bunch of, old white guys in these positions does not mean that everybody else can get their way in. Yeah, so that was maybe not a complete sentence, but yeah, speak a little bit more for the folks who are intrigued about holding a position like community board and how they can approach that.
Yeah, so the only way we're actually going to go about any change is through policy. And policy is what moves the United States, is what governs us, is what polices us. And so if we're not actively involved in those conversations about the policies, we're not going to get the change that we want to see. We can post on social media, we can take to the streets, we
All
can
of those things are
boycott,
great.
we can divest.
Right.
This is all things we should absolutely be doing. But we are governed by policies. And if you want to actually actively take change and make change, you should be getting involved in your local politics. You should be getting involved in your local elections. And for me, my journey did not start for community board until I wanted to take action. And so I joined a housing nonprofit called Open New York, and they're a nonprofit that focuses on housing policy. So they are actively in community board meetings, they're at local official meetings, they're at policy discussions, and they're having those conversations. They're not necessarily on the streets or posting on social media or doing, the grassroots groundwork type stuff, but they are involved in the policy making.
Yeah.
And I was someone that's involved in the grassroots and building community. And so once they introduced me to the community board, I applied. And when I apply myself to anything, I go
You
full
go.
on. I go full on.
Go
yeah.
big or go home.
So I reached out to the Brooklyn Borough president, and I just, made my presence known.
Yeah.
I'm in this community. I want to be on the board. Yeah. And so I applied, and the application is pretty long, but it's definitely it's long for a reason. They want you to feel like it's unimaginable. It's something you can't do for a reason. That's why you just have to do it.
Right.
You just have to do it.
Yeah.
And there's also a 30-minute interview, I believe, that's also attached to that. And it's pretty easy, a conversation about what you do for your community and how you want to make change, how you act in the community. It's pretty straightforward. And shortly after the interview, they'll let you know if you're on. If for me, I was super excited to be on. However, my fiance also applied, and he wanted to be on more than I wanted to be on, and he did not get it. But it's also great to have a partner that also believes in what you believe and supports your beliefs and policy, and you're able to have those conversations. Again, I feel like communicating is the best way to make change, and policy is how we communicate change. Yeah. And if you're not having those conversations with your loved ones, your closest ones, your friends, the change is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And get involved with your community. Bike.
Yes.
Visit the dog parks. If you don't have any, you should be advocating for dog parks. Yeah. Go to your local parks. Go to your local community shop, your local coffee shop. Your local plant nurseries. Definitely support your local plant nurseries. Get to know the clerks inside that live in the community, and advocate for change together. Advocate for the change you want to see in your community together. Actively do that. You have to go out of your way to do that. They make it hard for a reason. I can't express that enough. It's hard for a reason. We have to continue to do it.
I was about to ask you to give some advice for listeners, but you just did an incredible job at preempting that question and giving a really, really strong set of words for people. I think that it's we need to hear from folks like you that it is hard for a reason. And also have that energy of support from folks like you who are nobody's going to be making it easy. And that is what's going on. That is the state of things. Do you have anything else that that comes to mind in terms of folks looking to maybe get more in touch with their own superpowers, to figure out what those superpowers might be, in addition to all the incredible stuff you just said, because that was sufficient. But I just want to give the opportunity, in case you have any more to say, to explicitly ask that question.
Yeah, I would say, so for myself, I would say my superpower is bringing people together. And I've always enjoyed bringing people together, whether it would be for fun or community service or to create a project or, to uplift people. I was just home visiting my mother for her 62nd birthday, and we threw her a surprise party, and she had no idea about it. And I was able to invite my family and my cousins and of course my fiance, and surprise her. She cried and bailed like a baby, and it was totally, completely worth it. But during the birthday, we ended up having a conversation, just a Black conversation about what it's like to be Black right now in America. And I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, and I would say the resources that are available down there, the advertising that's happening down there, the marketing that's happening down there, it's not what's happening in more liberal, more progressive cities like New York or LA or, in Detroit even. It's not those conversations, but they're aware. We're people are aware of what's happening. Yeah. They might not be able to vocalize it or put words to it the way that you may be able to do that, but they feel, they know what's happening. And we were able to talk about Palestine and what that means for us, and how we understand how that relates to us as Black people in Birmingham, Alabama. Right. They understand how policing people is wrong. They understand that they understand that colonizing, essentially colonizing, is bad, because they've experienced it, they've seen it, they've read about it. It's taught down through history. And so my younger nieces and the future generations give me so much hope, because they're so aware. They're much more aware than what we are. I feel like when I was 10 and 11, I had no idea what fighting for freedom, what is that? Like, I'm Black. Like, even that is just like, what do you mean? It wasn't until I moved from Birmingham to Michigan where I was like, I'm Black. Like, I have an accent. You know what I mean? And it just reminds me that we all have a story, and we all can make change. And you have to find your superpower. You have to find what you do to make people smile.
Yes.
What you do to brighten people's lights. Yeah. What do you do that motivates other people? And you should be doing that. Yeah. You should be doing that.
Thank you. That's, yes. As a sort of final kind of closing question, I'm just really curious about, like, kind of your dreams a little bit more about what's in the future for Rob. What is the type of community that you envision building moving forward, and what's your kind of future vision? You can take that in however a time scale you want. I want to get inside of your head a little bit.
Yeah. For me personally, in the future for me, I would love to envision a world where capitalism and consumerism does not exist. And if it does exist, it exists in the sense that we are paying to liberate others. We are paying companies to, provide more sustainable products, or to invest more in communities of color, or to, divest and break down these systems of oppressions. That's like a Star Trek type, really future generations. Yeah, we're paying to liberate others, if it's still a capitalist society. For me personally, I would love to be able to have a nonprofit that's able to provide staffing for supportive housing, and we're able to create horticulturalists and horticulturers that are able to, be in these housing units and be able to be a face and presence for people that need to see people care about not just having, a shelter, but care about you thriving in this community and being able to create your own community. I would love to be able to have a nonprofit that's able to do that. Yeah. And I also would love to travel more. Yeah, I want to see more of the world. I do.
I love that. And I have no doubt that you will be able to accomplish all of those things, not in the long time frame. Thank you so much, Rob, for this conversation, for being so vulnerable and sharing. I am obsessed, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was such an uplifting and an outlet for me, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.